super excited to be joined by a dear friend of mine in just a second as we get things set up. We are having the distinct privilege tonight of being joined by Heidi Ganahl, who is the Republican nominee for governor in the state of Colorado. I've known Heidi for a very long time. Way back to when I was in college and I first got started with Turning Point USA on my college campus and started getting involved in conservative politics in the state of Colorado. I met Heidi, although she was a Colorado buff. We won't hold it against her, right? The CU buffs are still great. When she was a regent for the University of Colorado system, which essentially means a leadership position for higher education in Colorado. And it was so inspiring seeing what she was doing for college students in the state of Colorado, changing the rigor of academia, supporting free speech on campus, and really standing up for every student's right to have their voices heard. And so we have now seen Heidi take on so many different leadership roles in the state of Colorado as an entrepreneur, as a mom. She is so inspiring. And I wanted to bring her on the stream a couple of days before Election Day, which is so soon, so that you guys can answer some questions you might have about Heidi, about her campaign, about the difference and impact that she's making in an increasingly liberal and progressive state as a diehard conservative and fighter for freedom. So all of that to be said, please join me in welcoming my dear friend Heidi Ganahl.
Well, I'm so glad to be here. This is very exciting. My goodness, I was trying to figure out how long we've known each other too. Back when I was a baby politician, when I was a regent at CU, but today was actually my last regent board meeting.
Oh my gosh,
Uh,
was it really?
yeah, after 6 years of doing this, and it's been a true blessing. I've been so happy to be on the front lines of higher ed, but what a crazy time to be doing that job.
Oh my gosh, I know. And higher education has transformed so much since you first started getting involved in college campuses and higher ed. We'll get to that. But Heidi, for those that don't have the privilege of knowing you and being able to call you all the time, can you just tell us, before being a candidate for governor, before being a regent for a university system, who is Heidi?
Well, Heidi's a kid that grew up in Monument, Colorado, down by the Air Force Academy, a little town. Pretty simple life and didn't have a lot of money, but a lot of love and support from my parents who got married very young. And they inspired me to go out and do big things. And so I worked at Dairy Queen in high school, saved up my money, and then got a scholarship to college, and off I went. But I got into pharmaceutical sales out of college, but my real passion was thinking up crazy business ideas. And so my first husband and I would write up business ideas on the back of restaurant napkins all the time over a beer. And sadly enough, he died in a plane crash when we'd only been married a couple years. I
Mm.
was 27 and it changed my life dramatically. But a few years later, my brother talked me into taking one of those restaurant napkins and getting started. So I picked Camp Bow Wow, a doggy daycare idea, which was before doggy daycare was a thing. And we started it out together, and then he went off and did his thing. We fired each other like 5 times each, I think. And then built that business for about 15 years and sold it. And that's when I decided to give back and run for office and get involved in protecting the American dream that I'd been so blessed to live.
I love that so much. And you've embraced entrepreneurship in new ways since Camp Bow Wow, too. Tell us about that a bit more.
Well, an entrepreneur is kind of a creative outlet, right? Like I'm always got to be creating something cool and new. So I put it into creating nonprofits. I started Moms Fight Back, which is an organization to help moms dealing with really tough stuff like teen suicide and child abuse and domestic violence. And I started that about 10 years ago. And then I started the Fight Back Foundation, which was to help entrepreneurs that were working on products or services to help kids in Colorado. And then I started the Free to Be Coalition at CU to help students learn about how to debate and to have feisty conversation and walk out still being friends. So lots of different nonprofits I've done. Most recently, I did She Factor, which is SHEFACTOR, and it was a live platform for young women in their 20s to help them launch their careers in their lives. But we launched live events all over the country, 26 chapters in May of 2019. So then COVID happened and we had to take everything digital. So
Ugh.
it's been a crazy ride. But after the governor's race is done, either way, we're going to get it back and ramped up. So
Huge fan of She Factor, been around since the inception of that, so that's been so cool to see how it impacted my life, my siblings, and so many friends in the state of Colorado and around the country. How did you know that you wanted to transition into a role of public service larger than that in academia, to run for a statewide position of leadership, perhaps the most influential statewide position of leadership you could have chosen as governor?
Well, Isabel, you know me pretty well, and I don't do anything small, right? I go for big, bold things. And so when people were asking me, what I wanted to do next when I was headed into my final years as a regent, they said, well, I was the only statewide elected Republican, which is like not good, but it was an honor to be
Mhm.
representing my party and the principles that we have. And so they said, well, what do you want to run for? And I thought, well, I care so much about this state. I'm so upset about what's happening to it and the direction it's going. I think I'd like to run for governor. And they were like, oh, that's crazy. You can't beat the guy that's there right now. He's, very, very wealthy and he's formidable and all these things. And I just thought, I just have a feeling that things aren't going well. I just sense that people aren't happy. Well, about that time in August of 2020, I got diagnosed with a brain tumor that wasn't cancerous, but I had to have some pretty serious brain surgery. And they said, okay, now you have to rest and recover for the next couple months. And I had to sit on the couch and watch the election happen in the fall of 2020, which made me really, really mad and fired up. And so after that, I decided, I was going to go all in on running for governor once I got healthy and kind of recovered. So I waited about a year from my surgery and then launched my campaign in September of 2021.
You mentioned Colorado going in a trajectory people may not have had the foresight to understand, that things weren't as good as we thought they were. And it's kind of all been dissolving before our eyes in the last couple of years, since COVID, even. On the campaign trail and in these debates with the incumbent, Governor Jared Polis, you have all of the stats and all of the information for what's really happening in Colorado. What can you share with our audience of several thousand people watching live right now who may not be from Colorado about how bad things actually have become?
Oh boy. Well, there's a few things that are really causing Colorado's decline. The number one thing is crime, actually. We are number four in the country for like bad for crime. We are number one in auto theft, number one in bank
Wow.
robberies, number two in property crime, number one in porch pirates of all things. And it's just really tragic. And it leads back to a couple bad bills that were signed a couple years ago that are some of the policies you're seeing around the country: the soft on crime, let people out of jail, don't put drug dealers in jail. And that ties to our fentanyl problem. We are one of the worst states in the country for fentanyl. It's killing our kids, it's affecting our communities. And that's because I-25, the road, the interstate, goes right from the southern border of the United States into Colorado. And we are a sanctuary state. And that was a decision made by Jared Polis after he said he wouldn't do that. And it's
Mhm.
really destroyed our state in a lot of ways. And unfortunately, law enforcement and ICE cannot coordinate and work together to solve the problem as we're a sanctuary state.
Oh my gosh. Talk to me about education, particularly
Mhm.
in Denver. What's going on in Colorado education?
Goodness, Isabel, it's so bad for our kids. 60% of our kids in Colorado cannot read, write, or do math at grade level right now.
60?
60. And in Denver, which is used to be one of the best school districts in the country, 95% of African American and Hispanic kids cannot read at grade level.
I just got chills.
It's bad.
Wow. So the rise in crime, the horrible inflation that our state is experiencing well above the national average, the horrific educational consequences of the radical political left in Denver and the state of Colorado, these things all compiled for you, particularly as a mom. And you were in a debate with the incumbent, Governor Jared Polis, the other day where a new phrase came out. What was that phrase and what does it mean?
Oh goodness, he was trying to be like punchy, I guess. And he said, you're a mad mom and I am a happy dad. And I looked over and I was like, what did he just say? And I thought, well, yeah, I am mad. We have a lot of reasons to be mad. You've ruined our state. And us parents are not okay with it. And so I went on a little rant about it and it kind of took off and went viral. And so now we have all these moms making these amazing videos about why they're mad. And it's just become a thing, and I call it his McAuliffe moment, where he really turned the election and things have changed pretty dramatically in the last week or two.
Tell us more about that. How have they changed?
Well, the polling is really tightening up. We were pretty far behind just because he spent $25 million, him and his groups, in the last 8 weeks on ads, and we had about 3 or 4 million to spend, which is still a lot of money, but not anywhere near what he had. And so we were getting drowned by TV ads and
Yeah.
mailers just lying about me and what I believe. And so I just knew I needed to really perform well in those debates. I probably wasn't going to get the attention I needed on the race. So I was ready for all four debates and I just held him accountable and did my best to make some headlines. And he made his own headline, the last one, with that comment. And so we are now within 6 or 7 points of him. We've got
Wow.
6 days left and we've caught up a lot. And I truly believe there are a lot of voters in Colorado that aren't going to get picked up in the polls. Like, I think we're going to outperform with Hispanic voters. I think we're
Mhm.
going to outperform with parents. We're going to outperform in the faith community. And I think we're going to outperform with business owners, small business owners who were suffocated during COVID by Jared Polis.
Oh, that's so true. And I think you've really surprised a lot of people who insisted out the gate that this was an unwinnable race for anybody other than the incumbent, regardless of what political party you were a part of. And you are absolutely in a winnable race where it's anybody's game right now and will come down to every single ballot cast on Tuesday. Let's talk about Colorado for a second, because I certainly could have never predicted that this state that I grew up loving and experiencing the most magical childhood in, as you did as well, would have turned into California 2.0 so quickly. I mean, Denver feels an awful lot like Los Angeles, having spent significant time there working with PragerU. I've driven through Skid Row, and downtown Denver looks very eerily similar these days. The politics have become out of control. The traffic and the movement to Colorado from citizens of California, Illinois, New York, and around the country during COVID has become out of control. But Colorado, shockingly, still remains one of the only states in the country with 1/3 registered Republican voters, 1/3 registered Democrat voters, and 1/3 registered independent voters. So, really, any election is up for grabs. Why do you think the left has been so skilled in reaching those 1/3 of independent voters, leaving you as the only statewide elected Republican?
Well, I think they make some very lofty promises that they haven't been able to keep, and the hens are starting to roost. I can't remember that saying, but things are kind of coming around, and people are seeing that these policies that they put in place that promised all these great things are a disaster. And so it's all this perfect storm. And what our policies promise is freedom and the ability to trust you as the voters of Colorado to make good decisions for your life, your business, your family. In fact, I say the only thing I'll mandate as governor is freedom.
Hmm.
People have really seen the heavy hand of government come down on us over the last 4 years, and they don't like it. It's not the Colorado way of life. It's not the Colorado we grew up with, the wild, wild west. And we're not California. This is not Gavin Newsom's state, but Jared Polis sure acts like it, and it's starting
Yeah.
to look like it. So my job as governor, day one, is to undo as much as I possibly can of the damage that he has done.
In mandating freedom, what does that look like from a policy perspective for you?
Oh, it means rolling back the size of government. He's grown it by over 25% in the last 4 years. He's added 4,000 full-time employees into the bureaucracies. He's got 300 boards and commissions that does his dirty work. He's added 85 new taxes and fees. The list goes on and on. He's decimated our oil and gas industry here, which is a huge part of our economy, and been very disrespectful to farmers and ranchers. So I'll pretty much do the opposite of everything I just said as well.
Addressing the elephant in the room a bit, a lot of people at the national level from the DNC adore Jared Polis because he's America's first elected gay governor and
Mhm.
has a first gentleman husband there in the governor's mansion in Colorado. Do you think that identity politics have played a big role in this election? And you would be the first female governor of Colorado. Has that played a big role in your campaign on the trail?
No, it really hasn't actually. I haven't talked a lot about it because I want to be judged on my experience and my leadership capabilities, except for the fact that I call myself a mom on a mission because I think it's really important to have somebody in the governor's mansion who's on the front lines with our kids, going to PTA meetings, going to soccer tournaments, going grocery shopping. I don't know that Jared Polis knows how much a loaf of bread costs right now or a
Yeah.
tank of gas. So I think it'll bring a real strong dose of reality to the governor's mansion. Now, I've been a successful entrepreneur. I built a $100 million brand, but I also have four kids and three of them are very young. And I see firsthand the struggle that families are facing.
Yeah.
And my passion is for making things okay for kids. And right now, our kids are not okay.
What would you say to the average conservative American who's buying into this idea that they need to leave their increasingly blue state,
Mhm.
at least a deep purple, for a place like Florida or Texas or Arizona where they feel that bigger sense of community? Why is it important to stay and fight for the places that you love?
Well, don't get me wrong, the thought has occurred to me as things have gotten so bad in Colorado, but I chose to stay here and fight. And I truly believe we have better ideas, better solutions, better ways for us to live in a beautiful future for our kids. And so we've just got to get better at messaging about being the change we want to see in politics and being the change we want to see in leadership. And things will shift. You've seen what's happened in Florida with DeSantis and the change in leadership there and how the economy is thriving. Or you look at Tennessee that went to 0% income tax over
Mhm.
6 years and it's thriving now. So, it's there. It's there. The shift can happen very quickly. And I think it's happening in Colorado in this election.
Oh, I love that. And I'm so excited for the future of Colorado. Honored to have voted for you and known you throughout this experience and just see the impact you're making on the campaign trail. We've got some fun questions in our live chat from all of our viewers. Mark has a question. What do you think you can do to improve the educational system in Colorado, Heidi?
Well, we've got to go all in on school choice. Similar to what Ducey just did in Arizona, we need to go to education savings accounts and make sure that power goes back to parents. We
Mhm.
also have to provide transparency in curriculum, which Jared Polis didn't support in the last legislative session. In fact, he signed a bill, a health education bill, a couple of years ago that has caused some very, very concerning trends in our schools here in Colorado around the woke ideology stuff. So we've got to have transparency for parents. We've got to have true school choice, which will create competition. And that's how we're going to fix our schools.
For those who don't know much about that bill, can you unpack some of the contents for us?
Yeah, I mean, again, it had good intentions that, the health education spectrum of what's taught would be expanded to be more inclusive. And I have dear friends who are gay and trans, and they're against this stuff too, what's happening in the classroom.
Yeah.
They're too young to be taught a lot of these things. And it's about overall sexualization in the classroom, not LGBTQ or trans. It's about teaching our kids about sex. And that should be taught by the parents and the family, and the parents should have the ability to have those conversations before a kindergarten classroom does. And so I think we've gone too far on that. I think parents agree with me. That's why we flipped 10 school boards here in Colorado.
Mhm.
And so transparency in the classroom, getting parents engaged in those conversations and being able to decide what's best for their child is where we need to go on that front.
Totally agree with you. And it is just crazy how young they want to start talking to your kids about sex, even in the state like Colorado. Eddie Shore has a question for us. Speaking of primary school and kindergarten, what do you think about a primary schools program? Do the kids deserve better education? I think if I'm understanding his question correctly, do you support like a generally funded, taxpayer funded primary school program? I know your opponent has talked a lot about that.
Oh, you mean the pre-K?
Yeah.
If that's what you're talking about, Isabel.
Universal pre-K, I think he calls
Yes.
it.
Well, I don't think the government has done a real bang up job of teaching our kids in the
Yeah.
school classes they already have, K through 12, as evidenced by those scores we talked about. But I do recognize that young families are really struggling right now. I believe there are better free market solutions. I've been on the board of a group called Epic here in Colorado, which helps businesses figure out how to offer childcare and pre-K an employee benefit. I think that's a better way to go. But here's the thing, if you look at Head Start, that program that was supposed to be the end all be all to get our kids back on track, guess what? It didn't work. It worked
Hmm.
when they were in it, but by second grade, the results were gone. So we've got to rely more on giving resources to parents
Yeah.
and businesses, employers to help solve these problems. The government is not doing a good job at it.
Amen to that. Gup Church in the live chat says, what can you do to harness the out of control teachers unions in
Oh,
Colorado?
they are out of control here. Oh my goodness, they are powerful. And if you look at the size of the bureaucracy that's grown in K through 12 and higher education, um, $250,000 on average goes into a classroom in Colorado in K through 12. Only 50K of that goes to the teacher. We've got to pay our teachers more. We've got to put
Mhm.
more money back into the classroom instead of hiring more administrators. The administrative bloat is out of control in K through 12 and higher education.
Yeah, it's crazy. And these teachers' unions have really held Colorado schools hostage almost every year by going on
Mhm.
strike, and they don't actually see the demands come to fruition themselves more often than not. The unions do. I have a fun question for you. What do you think has been the most politically charged and most passionate issue that you're seeing from Coloradans being all around the state on the campaign trail?
Oh goodness. I think the overreach of government during COVID, the mandates, the quarantines, the requirements. I mean, here Jared Polis gets up and talks about how he's all about in one of the debates, all about women's healthcare choices. And I looked at him and I said, didn't you fire thousands of women healthcare workers because they didn't want to take an experimental vaccination? And
Yep.
he was all flustered and didn't know what to say. I'm like, you're such a hypocrite. That is not true what you just said. So I think the heavy hand of government in a state that's very libertarian and the damage it did to our kids, to small businesses, to our healthcare system is what is really a hot topic here and is probably going to win me the election.
Absolutely. And Colorado is still reeling with a lot of the economic fallout from those decisions, too. So people are still definitely hurting. Alex Padron in our live chat says, what's the plan for fighting crime and drug war in Colorado?
Well, first we have to cancel our status as a sanctuary state. Then we have to give law enforcement the ability to do their job and give them resources. And public safety funding will be one of my highest priorities. Even though we're going to zero income tax, there's plenty of money to make sure that public safety is funded well. Then we've got to do bail reform. We've got to make sure that bad guys are put in jail and kept there. And if they want to reform, they can do it in jail instead of doing more harm out in our communities. We've also got to have respect for law enforcement again and first
Hmm.
responders and make sure that they know we have their back as leaders. I've got to fire the parole board. I've got to fire the heads of Department of Corrections and Public Safety and Justice, and then put in good, solid judges that are not activists.
You have your work cut out for you on day one, Heidi, as
I'm
governor.
ready. I'm
We've
ready.
got one more question because I know you are a bit crunched for time being on the campaign trail so close to Tuesday. And then I'll have you answer one more from myself.
Sure.
One more question in the live chat. What would you say to states that have not legalized marijuana?
I'd say be very, very careful. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. Just think about the consequences, mostly to the children,
Yeah.
and be careful of high potency marijuana. Right now, dabbing and butter and shatter, these forms of high potency marijuana that the kids are doing are very damaging. So if you go in, you want to legalize it, make sure there are very strict boundaries and that they are protecting the children of the state from the damaging effects of the pot industry. And make sure you know where the money's going because it's really complicated. And here in Colorado, we don't have a clue.
Nope, no clue at all. We talked about that on the stream a couple of weeks ago, but it has definitely been more complicated than we think. Heidi, to round things out, where can people find you? How can they support you as we get closer to Tuesday? And what's the biggest takeaway you want people to walk away from your campaign with?
Well, I want you to take away that we can win. We can win back Colorado in just a few days and have a bright future for our kids and my future grandkids. I truly believe it is a special moment in time. We have a special opportunity here if everyone will work together. We've got to outwork his crazy amount of money he's spending. So if everyone can go to HeidiForGov.com, sign up, share the debates. Those are a really good way to show the distinction between me and Jared Pullis. The El Paso County one on the website is my favorite. So just share the link. A lot of the influencers are sharing the Mad Mom clip. It's really fun and gets people riled up. And then also, you can download the app Campaign Sidekick and help from anywhere in the country making calls for us. You can also share on social media. I need your army, Isabel. We are not good as Republicans at social media. I mean, you know
True.
this. So
I say this a
share,
lot, but we're
comment.
happy to help you. The Getter Gang, as we call ourselves, will be in full force to support Heidi this week and make sure we get you over the threshold there in Colorado. Heidi, thank you so much for taking the time to join us to fight for the things you believe in. Give those kids and your beautiful doggo a big hug for me, and I will see you very, very soon.
Thanks, Isabel. I so appreciate your support.